I hope everyone's doing well. My name is Marvin Liao, and I represent 500 Startups. I want to thank the team from Slush, Rudy, Martin, for actually having me. So thank you guys for sticking around during lunchtime, I think, right now. So I have a 10-minute presentation and talk very, very quickly about startups to scale up, which is basically about growth, right, and how to think about growth. All right, let's go into this. So who I am. I'm a partner at 500 Startups. I'm actually a mentor at about 20 different startup accelerators across the globe. On a board, an advisory board of about 8 different startups in digital media, ad tech, e-commerce. And I actually spent 10.5 years actually at Yahoo before I actually became a partner here. And I also spent 2 years actually at e-commerce company, e-commerce startup that raised about $45 million in Silicon Valley, all right? Let's go through this. Okay, so who is 500 Startups? 500 Startups is a global seed fund. And we're also very well known for Accelerator. So we have roughly about $125 million under management. We've invested in about 900 companies in our Accelerator and our seed fund across the globe over the last 4.5 years. And so this talk is actually about growth. And so the lights are actually really bright. But who here thinks, we have a very big sample size, what do you think is the most important thing in regards to a successful startup? Anybody? Please. Huh? Not the answer. What else? Anybody? Who here thinks the most important thing in a successful startup is a great product and technology? You? Anybody else? It's a trick question. You're wrong, actually. If that's the way you think your startup's going to fail. The most important thing is getting customers and growing. All right? Now let me talk about why. So I know I didn't mean to trick you, but it's like a brave guy to volunteer. So quoting my boss, I'm appalled at the number of startups who say we've spent nothing on marketing. Our customer acquisition is entirely organic. AKA, I'm a marketing retard, all right? Anyone who comes to me and says, as an investor, right, I invest in companies, any startup who comes to me and says, we've grown organically, and I'm like, that basically means you have, or we're growing virally. When someone says that, it says you have no idea what you're doing, and you will not be able to grow systematically, even if it gave you $10 million, all right? So understand that. Do not say that to professional investors, because we do not like that. For us, if we give you money, we want to understand whether you know how to use that money properly, not just to build your product, but to find scalable ways to grow, right? And systematic ways of growing. All right, so one of the best ways to start, and this is something that Dave started, it's called Pirate Metrics R, right? Thinking about when you bring in customers into the funnel, it's acquisition, activation, retention, revenue, and referral, all right? And this is something that was invented probably about 5 or 6 years ago, and it's a great way to think about your customer funnel and figure out where the drop-off is, actually, all right? The other thing to think about is distribution and marketing, right? This is the key part of my talk, is that we are so lucky to be involved now in doing startups, where there's so many channels and platforms where you can reach over 100 million, in some cases like Facebook and Google, close to 1.4 billion people just on one platform. Or if you look at the App Store, right? The App Stores, you can reach there's something close to, over 1 billion people with your app, right? Like that's incredible power that you actually have by leveraging these platforms. And I think to step back, how critical this is and how critical marketing is and differentiation is now, is just like 5 years ago, how many apps do you think there were on the App Store, right? Probably like several thousand. Do you know how many apps are on the Apple App Store right now, at least in the US? It's something like 1.3 million apps, right? How do you stand out in all this competition, right? So the reality is that having a great product is important. That's half the battle. The second part you really need to think about is how do you get distribution, how do you get customers, and actually acquire them very, very cheaply, right? And this is also incredibly challenging when you think about these distribution channels and partnerships. This is a slide I borrowed from my friend James Currier about all the different channels and the growth, right? You think about like Zynga. Zynga grew on the back of Facebook, but when Facebook basically changed their algorithm, they completely dropped, right? And you think about like Twitter and all these new growing channels here. The reality is that you never want to be too dependent on just one channel, all right? But the reality is that the 80-20 rule is that most of your growth is going to come from just one channel, All right? And so there's a methodology. This is from Justin Mares. He's actually on our distribution team at 500 Startups. So at 500 Startups, we think a lot about, as a VC firm, as an accelerator, we think a lot about distribution and marketing. So we actually have an in-house team of about 5 people, and their whole job is to focus on helping startups think through their metrics and actually find new channels to actually build on. And so one of the things that he uses is this. It's a very, very basic framework for thinking about growth, is that, number one, you want to start with like, where do you think like your audience is and your growth, your potential high growth channels. And we kind of stole this from Coca-Cola, right? Which is 70-20-10 rule of basically you take 70% of your budget and you put it into things that you know will work for sure, right? That delivers good unit economics and are going to work. Then what you do is you take 20% of your budget and put it into the next potentially growing channels. And then you take the last 10% of your budget and put it into new sort of experimental budgets of things that could work. And this allows you to diversify out your, what we call your channel portfolio, right? So it allows you to figure out to continue growing where you actually are growing on the channels that actually work, that you know that work for you, and it allow you to also experiment into new future channels so you're never dependent on just one channel. All right? The other thing that's also great, right? I remember the good old days of just like when we used to build these analytical tools ourselves, right? At Yahoo, we had to build our own tools. In the last 3 or 4 years, there's been all these awesome analytical tools that exist now that you can actually buy off the shelf, right? So things like website analytics. You have Google Analytics, which is free, to funnel measurement like Kissmetrics and Mixpanel, using user surveys like Qualaroo is an awesome service. You can actually just put it on your site, and when someone comes to your site and they drops off, there's basically like this questionnaire that actually pops up and goes like, why did you leave? Like there's all these really awesome tools now. There's A/B testing tools that you can get off the shelf that you don't have to go and buy and purchase now. And so the great thing is that there's so many tools that are available now to find out what's working and what is not working. It's a great time to be a startup and to learn how to grow, all right? And last of all, right, this is a very quick presentation, is like, quote my boss, is like, to be honest, design and marketing aren't just equally important as engineering. Designers, product managers, and technical analytical marketers are usually way more important than coders, right? And I think particularly in this region of like, in Finland, in Denmark, Norway, in the Baltic region, in Sweden, I actually do not worry about product. And most of the times when I look at startups here, products here are so much better designed and actually work so much better than the US. The reason US startups win, not just because they raise a lot of money, it's helpful, right? Like money's helpful. But the reason they win is because they do sales and marketing better than anybody else, all right? I can say this not just, I lived in the US for 15 years. I'm Canadian. I had to learn all this stuff. Sales and marketing is arguably the most important thing to grow your startup, and do not ignore it. Don't assume that just having a great product, the build it and they will come, does not work, all right? And this is actually also a challenge in the Valley, but I think this is something they learn very quickly, of just like, if you ignore sales and marketing, you're ignoring it to the detriment of your company, all right? So I hope in this quick talk that I've given you some new general sort of views on growth. Like I'll be around for the rest of the day and I'll be sitting around afterwards. My talk is usually like about 30-40 minutes, so this is a very condensed version. There's a lot more to this, but if you have any questions, please come find me, and thank you very much for your time.